Hey everyone, welcome to US Daily Beat. It's Monday, August 24th, 2026, and I'm so glad you're here. We've got some really interesting stories for you today. Iran faces greatest financial offensive ever, says US Treasury Secretary. UK PM Burnham vows support for Ukraine despite outrageous threats from Russia. Iran faces greatest financial offensive ever, says US Treasury Secretary. But real quick before we dive in, if you'd like to support the channel, go ahead and subscribe and give this video a like. It genuinely means the world to us, and it's what keeps this show going every single day. All right, with that said, let's get into it. Let's start with something happening in world news. The pressure campaign on Iran just got a lot sharper. U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent says Washington is preparing what he called the greatest financial offensive ever, with the goal of cutting off Iran's economic lifelines and isolating any country that keeps doing business with it. In plain English, that means the U.S. is not just targeting Iran itself, but also warning other nations and companies. If you help Iran move money, trade, or finance, you could face consequences too. This fits into a longer standoff between the U.S. and Iran, where sanctions have been one of Washington's main tools for years. The idea is to squeeze Tehran's ability to fund its government and, more broadly, the regional activities that worry U.S. allies. Iran, for its part, has learned to live under sanctions, but each new round can still hit ordinary people hard through inflation, shortages, and a weaker currency. So why should we care? Because moves like this can ripple far beyond Iran. They can affect global oil markets, shipping routes, and relations between the U.S. and countries trying to balance trade with both sides. What to watch next is whether other nations pull back from Iran or test Washington's warning. Switching gears here, this one's about world news. Tensions between London and Moscow are heating up again, and this time the focus is on Ukraine's military aid. Britain's Prime Minister Burnham says the UK will keep supporting Ukraine, even after Russia warned there would be consequences over reports that British drones were used in Ukrainian operations. That's the kind of language that immediately raises the temperature because when two nuclear-armed powers start trading threats, the whole world pays attention. What's important here is the bigger picture. The UK has been one of Ukraine's strongest backers since the war began, supplying weapons, training, and financial support. So when Moscow points the finger at Britain, it's not just about one reported drone operation. It's really about the ongoing struggle over how far Western countries are willing to go in helping Ukraine resist Russia's invasion. For you and me, this matters because it could shape what happens next in the war and how much pressure builds between Russia and the West. The big question now is whether this turns into more rhetoric or whether we start seeing a fresh round of retaliation and diplomatic fallout. Switching gears here, this one's about business and finance. The pressure on Iran's economy is about to get a lot heavier. U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent says Washington is preparing what he called the country's greatest financial offensive ever, with the goal of cutting off Iran from the global financial system. In plain English, that means the U.S. wants to make it much harder for Iran to move money, do business abroad, and keep the economic lifelines flowing that help its government and industries operate. This is part of a broader pattern we've seen for years. Sanctions, export restrictions, and financial isolation being used as leverage in U.S. foreign policy. What's different here is the scale and the message. Bessent said the U.S. will sever all economic ties with Iran, and that any country or business that keeps partnering with Iran financially could also face isolation. So this isn't just about Iran directly. It's about warning everyone else around the world to stay away too. Why should you care? Because moves like this can ripple through energy markets, shipping, banking, and global trade. If enforcement gets tighter, we could see more uncertainty for companies doing business in the region and more tension in already fragile markets. What we'll be watching next is whether allies line up behind this push and how Iran responds economically and politically. All right, so in business and finance, if you're in the middle of job hunting, especially for that first post-college role, this is a pretty tough sign of the times. New data from job site Adzuna suggests graduate vacancies have fallen by almost half over the past year, and the number of listings is now at its lowest level since 2016. That matters because graduate jobs are often the on-ramp into the wider economy. When those openings shrink, it can leave new graduates competing harder for fewer roles, while also putting more pressure on early career salaries and making it tougher to get a foot in the door. And even if you're not graduating this year, we all feel these shifts eventually because today's entry-level hiring shapes tomorrow's workforce. The big question now is whether this is a temporary slowdown or part of a longer trend. Employers have been more cautious with hiring as the economic outlook has stayed uncertain, and that often hits graduate recruitment first. So if you're watching this space, keep an eye on whether companies start reopening those pipelines later this year or whether the squeeze continues. All right, so in technology, if you've spent any time on social media lately, you may have noticed a troubling trend. Videos of dangerous driving, including people going the wrong way on roads, sometimes get posted and spread fast before anyone can stop them. Now the UK Prime Minister is calling that behavior truly reprehensible. And the government is pressing TikTok and other platforms to take those clips down quickly. The concern here is bigger than one bad video. These posts can normalize reckless behavior, encourage copycats, and in the worst cases, put drivers, cyclists, and pedestrians at real risk. And because social media moves so fast, harmful content can rack up views long before moderators or police even catch up. What the government is really signaling is that platforms need to do more than just react after the fact. They're being asked to remove these videos and, more broadly, think harder about how their algorithms might amplify dangerous stunts in the first place. For you and me, this is a reminder that what looks like viral entertainment can actually be public safety content in disguise. The next thing to watch is whether these companies change their rules, speed up removals, or face more pressure from lawmakers if they don't. Now let's talk about technology. If you've ever watched a Twitch stream and thought, okay, but who actually owns all that footage? That question is now at the center of a new legal fight. Twitch and its parent company Amazon are facing a lawsuit that says the company used streamers' videos to help train AI systems without getting permission and without paying them properly. Here's the basic idea. Live streams aren't just entertainment anymore. They're also a huge source of data, and that data can be valuable for building AI that learns from human speech, reactions, gameplay, and real-time interactions. The lawsuit argues that streamers should not have their content pulled into that process without consent. And for creators, this is a really big deal. If you make content online, this case could help shape the rules around who controls it, who gets paid for it, and whether platforms can use it for AI training behind the scenes. For the rest of us, it's part of a much bigger conversation about how companies feed AI with real-world material. What happens next could matter far beyond Twitch, because a lot of platforms are watching these copyright and compensation battles very closely. And finally today, something from politics. The latest back and forth between Russia and the UK is heating up again, and this time the focus is Ukraine. Burnham says support for Ukraine will continue, even after Moscow warned there could be consequences over reports that British drones were used by Ukrainian forces. Those kinds of threats are not new from the Kremlin, but they do raise the temperature in an already dangerous conflict. What's underneath all this is the wider question of how far Western support for Ukraine should go. The UK has been one of Kiev's strongest backers, especially when it comes to military aid. And Russia has repeatedly tried to pressure countries helping Ukraine by warning them away from deeper involvement. So when you hear talk like this, it's not just rhetoric. It's part of the ongoing struggle over who has the upper hand and whether allies will stay united. For us watching from the outside, the big thing to keep an eye on is whether this turns into a diplomatic standoff or leads to any real change in support. Because every warning, every response, and every new weapons claim can shift the mood around the war pretty quickly. And that's it for today's US Daily Beat. Thanks so much for watching. I really appreciate you being here. And listen, if you'd like to support the channel and help us keep going, please do subscribe and give this video a like. It truly makes all the difference. Turn on notifications too, so you never miss tomorrow's episode. I'll be back with more news in the morning. Until then, take care, and I'll see you tomorrow.